Good morning. I'm Cindy Silva, Mayor of the City of Walnut Creek, and on behalf of the City Council, I am delighted to welcome you to Walnut Creek's 2013 Veterans Day observance. If you will please stand for the presentation of colors, the singing of the national anthem, and for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Shoulder. Ready. 2. 4. 5.
Thank you. You may be seated. I would like to thank the NOSC Alameda U.S. Navy Color Guard team for your participation today. The Walnut Creek Concert Band, under the direction of Harvey Benstein. That's why I said you gotta go to the other side. I'm so sorry. Go around the back. Under the direction of Harvey Benstein for your stirring rendition of the Star Spangled Banner, and Mayor Pro Tem Christina Lawson for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I would also like to introduce the other members of the City Council who are here today, Bob Simmons and Justin Waddell, and to recognize a number of other dignitaries, State Senator Mark DeSaulnier, Assemblymember Joan Buchanan, County Supervisors Candace Anderson and Karen Mitchoff, both of whom represent Walnut Creek. And a number of former Walnut Creek mayors are with us. If they could please rise. I'd like to introduce former mayors Gwen Regalia, Charlie Abrams, I know Gary Skrell is somewhere in the back, and perhaps Kathy Hicks is here as well. Our city manager Ken Nardoff is here, and representing Assemblymember Susan Bonilla is Norlin Aspreck. Most importantly, please join me in recognizing all of the veterans who are here This observance is about all of you. Would you please rise? Thank you. You may be seated. The invocation this morning will be delivered by Reverend Robert Williams. Reverend Williams is a veteran of the Second World War who enlisted in the U.S. Navy in October 1942 and served as a deck officer in the Pacific Theater. Specifically, Reverend Williams was a patrol craft expert and an anti-submarine watchman. After his discharge from the Navy in the summer of 1946, Reverend Williams continued to serve in the reserves, but he also completed his education and became a minister. In 1948, Reverend Williams was the founding pastor of Grace Presbyterian Church here in Walnut Creek, and he served as Grace Presbyterian's minister until his retirement in 1990. Reverend Williams.
I invite each one of us in our own way to be in the spirit of prayer. Creator God, you have made of one blood all persons who live on this beautiful globe. Yet we spill that blood in war after war and in acts of violence and terrorism. We come to you this time because in 1918, at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the guns of the World War I fell silent. That day became a day of glad rejoicing for the peace to follow, the war to end all wars. None welcomed that armistice more than the military persons doing the fighting. But from the fields of Flanders where the poppies grow, to Afghanistan and Syria today, wars continue. We pray to you for those in our armed forces who at this very hour serve to protect our lives and work to bring peace with justice and civility to a war-weary world. And now, in a moment of silence, I invite you to reflect, to remember, and to offer your own thoughts as we mark this Veterans Day of Remembrance. As we remember those who gave their lives in military service, the poet affirms, "They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we shall remember them." Giving thanks for those in the military who served in the past, help us now to welcome home the veterans who returned, wounded in body, mind, or morals. As individuals, families, churches, businesses, let us make sure that they find a healing and inclusion in our communities in this living present. Gracious God, you spoke through the prophets of a day when swords would be turned into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks, a time when generations to come will not learn war anymore. Guide our Congress, judiciary, president, and administration with your guidance. Give them the courage to work for justice here and around the globe, and thus produce peace. Help each one of us to work for reconciliation where there is conflict, to overcome the culture of violence in our homes, schools, businesses, and city streets, that the epidemic of killings can cease. Then we can, with joy, join in singing that our alabaster cities gleam undimmed by human tears. This we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Reverend Williams, thank you for your words of inspiration this morning and also for your service to our country during World War II. Originally called Armistice Day, Veterans Day, November 11th, is the day we celebrate and honor those men and women who have served our nation both in times of war and in times of peace. It is a day we can thank America's veterans for their love of country and for their willingness to serve and to sacrifice for the common good. Veterans Day was established in 1919 by President Woodrow Wilson to memorialize the end of World War I, the Great War, the war that was considered at that time to be the most destructive, sanguinary, and far-reaching war in the annals of human history. World War I had lasted nearly 5 years, from 1914 to 1918. It had involved 2 continents, and fighting had stopped on November 11th, 1918 at 11 a.m., the hour of the official ceasefire in Europe. Thus, the reason we commemorate Veterans Day each year on November 11th at the 11th hour. It's been 95 years since the end of World War I, and no veteran of that war is still living. The last American veteran of the Great War, Frank Buckles, died just 2 years ago at the age of 110. But our nation still has some 21 million veterans living today that we honor. About 1 million are still with us from World War II, 5.4 million from the Korean War, about 7.4 million from the Vietnam era, another 5.4 million from the Gulf Wars, 1990 to the present, and 5.3 million from peacetime. And whether these veterans fought in the trenches of France or the jungles of Vietnam, whether they spent their days at sea or in the skies, whether they braved the cold winter of Korea or the blistering heat and sands of Iraq, one thing is true. Those who have served in the military have a shared experience and a bond of understanding that is unlike any other. Nothing in civilian life approximates the daily and hourly hardships of those who have served in the military, and nothing in civilian life builds a sense of loyalty, reliance, or commitment than service in the military. Soldier, sailor, aviator, or Marine, those who have served know what it means to rely on a friend. They know how to look out for someone else because that other person, the buddy who is next to you, is no doubt the one person you can and must rely on to look out for you. They know that they fight not just for country or for cause, but just as significantly, they fight for those who stand beside them and who will protect them from harm. They know that standing together is one of the highest forms of selfless courage, and they know that their commitment to each other is what leads to great acts of heroism. For those of us who have not served, this sense of commitment and loyalty, this camaraderie, is difficult to fathom. But our keynote speaker this morning has promised to try to enlighten us. Dr. Steve Cram is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel and a Vietnam veteran. In addition, he is probably the youngest survivor of the attack on Pearl Harbor. In 1941, a 4.5-year-old Steve was living in Hawaii with his mother and father, who was a congregational minister on Maui. On the morning of December 7th, Steve and his family were visiting Oahu because his father had been invited to give church service on the Navy hospital USS Solace. Steve had accompanied his father that morning to the Solace, which was anchored at Pearl Harbor right beside the USS Arizona. When the Japanese bombing began, Steve and his father were fortunately able to escape the harbor. Now, fast forward to 1960. After college, Steve entered the Army, and he served for 2 years in the intelligence unit at the Army's European headquarters in Heidelberg, Germany. After his 2-year stint, he completed his medical training, and then he returned to active duty in 1966 as a physician and as a major. And for the next 2 years, he was assigned to Saigon Hospital in Vietnam, where he not only worked as a physician, but he also was a pilot, flying helicopter missions to ferry the wounded from the field to the hospital. After Vietnam, Dr. Cram eventually made his way to San Francisco, where he worked for a number of years as the medical examiner and coroner for the city and county of San Francisco. He is now retired, and he lives part-time in Rossmore, and he serves as the music director at Grace Presbyterian Church. And Dr. Cram is a member of the Third Thursday Veterans Lunch Group, so I hope you'll join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Cram.
Thank you very much. Once upon a time when I was a little boy, and oh gosh, that was a long time ago, I noticed a very unique bond between military people, which we call camaraderie. It actually comes from the French word, camaraderie, and it's about the same meaning. There is some kind of a very, very unique bond, and I watched it very carefully as a boy. And more and more. Then it became my turn to do it. And I went to Heidelberg, Germany, and served in peacetime, and finished up. And during that period, I was kind of bored, so I learned to fly a helicopter. So when Vietnam broke out, Uncle Sam said, "Come hither, please." So I was stuck, and I ended up in Saigon Hospital. And it was very, very, again, watching this very unique bond called camaraderie between military people. And again, it became my turn, and finally I ended up back here in the Walnut Creek area, and I went and joined a group called the Third Thursday Lunch Bunch. And it turned out to be the same thing. I got to watch a very special bond between us as we did something. I don't know what it's called other than camaraderie. And it really intrigued me. And talk about a small world. I ended up going out into the battlefield and picking up soldiers and taking them back to Saigon Hospital to be repaired if we could. And I never met the man who brought the troops in on another helicopter. Well, when I got to the Third Thursday Lunch Bunch and I sat down at a table, I looked across the table and there he is. So talk about a small world. And this continues on to this day. And I would like to present to the mayor a book called Veterans in the Mist. And this book is interesting in that it just is a bunch of us who served, did what we had to do, and went back to work the next day as though nothing happened, but it did. So it's fun to join this group and sit around and talk and visit with people, and the world gets very, very small. Leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cram, for your thoughts and insights on the bonds of camaraderie and what those bonds mean to our veterans.
I have the privilege of third Thursday of every month getting together with a lot of veterans from all wars. We have a good lunch and chit-chat, tell stories. The first time we got together, there were 5 of us. Then said, well, this is good, we'll do it again next month. So the next month there were 7, and the next month after that there were 10. Just word of mouth, people have said, you know, oh yeah, we have a lunch group, we have a lunch group. Come and join us, come and join us. And as of today, we have a roster of 110. We have outside speakers, but most of the time, the fellas tells the stories, something that happened to them during the war.
We looked down, and there were the American soldiers. And everybody was smiling and cheering. The soldiers were throwing up cigarettes and candy to the people on the second floor and handing them out down below as well. And there was just complete jubilation. And you know, that was the highlight of my life right there.
Great group of guys. Tell all kinds of wild stories you ever heard in your life. A lot of fun.
It's easy to talk with the other fellas. It's like a, I hate to say it, a good highball.
Well, it's nice being here with all you gentlemen.
Glad you're here.
Who you calling gentlemen?
Well, we just get together to be among old buddies.
And all branches of service, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, regular Army, Coast Guard, the works.
It started with World War II, and we got Korean veterans, we have Vietnam veterans, now have the younger group from the wars going on overseas at the present time.
We get together informally and just chat as to, do you remember when, or what outfit were you in, where did you serve? Those little stories of these guys, who's kids. Some were younger than 21 at the time. Coming in here, some from all over this Central Bay Area. Individual stories which may seem like much to them or to others, but they're important to me.
So many times, different things that the civilian life wouldn't understand. The fellas are able to talk about it, and knowing for a fact that the others in that room can understand what happened. And, but the fellas in the group, we know. We've been there. And unless you've been there, you know, it's hard to understand.
I know when I was flying, I was a 19-year-old bombardier on a B-17 heavy bomber. And I flew 35 combat missions myself with a crew of 9. Great group of people. You have to rely on other people, and they rely on you. It's interesting how you can meet total strangers and be with them for a period of 6, 7, 8 months and just be so close to them.
And the other guys tell me about being prisoner of war. These are some of the things we remember, we dream about after all these years. And I think not just of me, but all the other buddies who went through this, who didn't come back. They aren't around to tell these stories anymore. They're the ones I think about. They're the ones I pray for.
And this is basically what the whole group is built on. Just memories that we share with each other. And sometimes it's good to bring up the memories, but when it's eating into your stomach, you know, it's best to get it out, speak about it, talk about it.
They don't carry your rank. There's some commanders, generals, privates, truck drivers in the service. That doesn't make any difference. You're all buddies who went through a lot. We're grateful to all of them.
And that's what we understand about each other. It doesn't make any difference whether the fellow was in conflict yesterday or the day before or last week or 70 years ago. They still go through the same thing. Once you've been there and been through it, I think it's something that'll stay with you the rest of your life. There's no soap or medication or anything else that's just going to wash it out. It's always going to be there.
It's a wonderful group of guys who gave so many years of their lives to save our country.
In some ways, I think it's a privilege for me, or each individual, to be there amongst the veterans that have given their time for their country, made in some ways the country and the world a safer place to live. And it's an honor to be a veteran, as far as I'm concerned.
The camaraderie and fellowship that the members of the Third Thursday Veterans Lunch Group describe was fostered during times of war, on the fields of battle, in places and in conditions that most of us will never experience. The Third Thursday Lunch Group started when 5 acquaintances decided to have lunch at the Greenery Restaurant at Diablo Hills Golf Course in early summer of 2000. These men, Bob Therrett, Ray Slaminski, Ralph Braille, Marvin Johnson, and Frank Tiscareno, really didn't know each other, but they had met casually after Bob Therrett had been honored at Walnut Creek's Memorial Day ceremony that May. After that first lunch, and as Bob Therrett mentioned on the video, the 5 decided to lunch again, and 7 joined them the next month. And then it was 10, and the next time it was a few more, and slowly the group grew. Over the last 13 years, the group has lost all but one of the 5 founding members, but it has grown to 110. And we are honored to have today a number of the members of the Third Thursday group with us, and I am delighted to be able to introduce and recognize some of them. It's only fitting that we begin with one of the founding members, Bob Therrett. So if he'll come up and join me. Turn around here so everybody can see you. Bob entered the U.S. Army Air Corps in December 1942 and was assigned to the 96th Bomb Group as a B-17 ball turret gunner. Wow. Bob and the crew flew, this will move, so don't lean on it. Bob and the crew flew 17 successful bombing missions over Europe in 1943 and 1944. However, on September 10th, 1944, they were flying their 18th mission when they were shot down over Nuremberg and captured. Following interrogation in Frankfurt, Bob was sent to Stalag Luft 4 in northeastern Germany near the Baltic Sea. A few months later, in February 1945, in the dead of winter, Bob and some 8,000 other Stalag 4 POWs began a march that would eventually be called the Black March. For 86 days, these prisoners were marched, sometimes covering 15 to 20 miles per day, and eventually they covered 600 miles in total. The march was concluded when the prisoners were liberated in May 1945 at the Elbe River by the Russians and the Americans. In 2000, Bob was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and he received that honor at Walnut Creek's Memorial Day ceremony, at which former Mayor Charlie Abrams was presiding. And Bob, while this isn't the Distinguished Cross, we are honored to be able to recognize you today and thank you not only for your service to our country, but also your service to our community to help get these guys together every month. So thank you so very much on behalf of the Grateful Nation. And I'll help you now. Bob led the Thursday group for a number of years, but he recently turned over the baton to Dick Ingram. Dick, come on and join me up here.
Okay, Cindy.
A native of Oakland, Dick entered the U.S. Army in February 1943 at the age of 18. He was originally assigned to an ASTP unit, but eventually he became part of the 104th Infantry Division, nicknamed the Timberwolves, which fought its way across France, Belgium, and Germany in 1944 and 1945. Coincidentally, Dick was among the troops that liberated the Black March at the Elbe River, including Bob Ferret, in early May 1945. So on behalf of a very grateful community and a grateful nation, thank you so much for your service to our country.
Thank you, Cindy.
Tom Catalano was also in the Army during World War II, and he is with us here today.
Okay. Thank you.
Tom entered the Army in 1944 and eventually became a part of the 37th Infantry Division, which was assigned to the Pacific Theater. In 1944 and 1945, the 37th was actively engaged in the campaigns to retake the Philippines. Tom was assigned to artillery and anti-aircraft duties during these campaigns. Then after the fighting concluded, Tom remained in the Philippines for a while, and he was responsible for processing POWs who had been imprisoned by the Japanese in the Philippines, including Dutch, Australians, and a few Jesuit priests. Tom, on behalf of a very grateful nation, we would like to recognize you for your service to our country, and thank you for being involved in the Third Thursday group.
Thank you, Mary.
And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.
George Fries also served in the South Pacific during World War II. George was attending Western Michigan College when he was drafted into the Army in April 1941. After boot camp, he was assigned to the 32nd Infantry Division, and as a technical sergeant, he spent the next 3.5 years in the jungles of New Guinea. In fact, the 32nd Division was nicknamed the Forgotten Guinea Pigs because the men of the 32nd spent the most time in combat without rotation than any other division in World War II. But despite that, George tells a great story about the honor of sitting beside First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt when she visited the troops in Australia during his time. George was one of the early members of the Third Thursday group, and it's with great honor that I thank you for your work on behalf of our country and recognize you today.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you to Bob, who started that third luncheon group, and to Dick Graham, who's always there, whether you're a stranger or not, you're still a buddy. Dick's there with a big smile. Welcome us all in that one Thursday of the month. Thank you.
Heber Smith was a first lieutenant and a B-17 bombardier with the U.S. Army Air Corps 94th Bomb Group during World War II. In 1944, Heber flew 35 bombing missions over Europe, but the mission he talks about the most is the 18th, the July 31st, 1944 planned mission to bomb the largest synthetic oil plant in Germany. German aircraft fire took out 2 engines of the B-17, and the plane and its 9-man crew ended up going down in the North Sea, about 20 miles from the east coast of England. Miraculously, all 9 crewmen survived, but the men ended up with only one 5-man lifeboat among them. So over the hours that they were in the water and waiting for rescue, 4 crewmen had to rotate to be in the water at any given time. Like Bob Therrett, Lieutenant Smith is the recipient of this Distinguished Cross of Color. But you know what? I think this certificate day is just as good because it says that we all appreciate so much what you did for our country and what you continue to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I've never been so cold in my entire
The Third Thursday group also has members who are veterans of the Korea and Vietnam eras, including Bob Howard. Bob enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1954 at the end of the Korean War and spent 21 years in the Navy as a chief petty officer. From 1957 through 1965, Bob was assigned to submarines, and then from 1966 to 1971, he served on an oil tanker refueling ship along the Vietnam and Philippine coasts. He concluded his Navy career helping with the rehabilitation of soldiers who were addicted with drugs, first in Japan and then for 4 years at the Navy Hospital in Oakland. And Bob has been a member of the Third Thursday group for about 10 years. Thank you so much for your service to our country. Thank you for being here today. Verl Hendrickson was also career Navy and is a member of the Third Thursday group. Verl spent 22 years in the service from 1955 to 1977, serving both on submarines and in naval aviation. And in 1977, when he retired, he was a chief petty officer as well. Verl has been in the Third Thursday group since 2003, enjoying a lot of lunches, I think.
Yes.
And thank you so much for being here today and for your service to our country.
He's our top photographer.
The only Coast Guard member of the Third Thursday group is Captain Charles Glass. Charles received his Coast Guard commission in 1955, and during his 30-year career with the Coast Guard, he served 5 years at sea in the North Atlantic, as well as 1 year as the commanding officer of what he describes as an isolated station
in northern Greenland.
In northern Greenland, which is not green, is it?
No. Well, actually, it is
part-time. In later years, Charles was the commanding officer of the Marine Safety Office here in the San Francisco area, and he retired from the Coast Guard in 1985 and has been an involved member of the Third Thursday group. Thank you so much for your service to our country, and I'm delighted you're here today.
I'd just like to say it took Bob Ferret a number of years to convince me that I didn't have to be a combat vet to join the Third Thursday
That's right,
group.
you don't.
And I'm glad he did.
And among the youngest and newest members of the Third Thursday group is Jerome Donikowski, who completed 11 and a half years with the U.S. Marine Corps earlier this year. Jerry joined the Marines in 2001, and over his 11 and a half years, he had 3 overseas tours. He served during the initial invasion of Iraq in 2003. He was then again deployed as part of the Marine Service Support Group and was a part of our country's tsunami relief efforts in Sri Lanka and Indonesia. And then from 2006 to 2007, he was back in the Middle East as part of a combat logistics battalion. Prior to his separation from the Marines earlier this year, Jerry was a staff sergeant running the airfield at March Air Force Base, from which our troops were being deployed to Afghanistan. Jerry is now a full-time student at Diablo Valley College, but he also serves as the Veterans Service Navigator for the Employment Development Department office here in Concord. And thank you so much, Jerry, for your recent service and for what you've done for our country. Thank you for being here. Would all of the members of the Third Thursday group please stand? It is truly an honor to be able to acknowledge the sacrifices each of you made on behalf of our country and to thank you for being here today. The members of the Third Thursday group have asked me to recognize one other individual, and I'm hoping he's here. It's their honorary group member, Jerry Whiting. Jerry, are you here?
Yes.
Just like the Academy Awards, there's always one in the crowd that is just not quite seated where they're supposed to be. Although he is not a veteran, Jerry has played a valuable role for the group in recent years, both as program chairman and as their historian. In fact, Jerry has helped the individual members of the group document their stories and has published these stories in the book that Dr. Cram mentioned during his keynote address, Veterans in the Mist. Jerry, I believe it's safe to say that many of the personal stories of our veterans would in fact be lost if it were not for you. So thank you so much for your dedication to this group of men and for what you have done. As we bring today's ceremony to conclusion, the Walnut Creek Concert Band is going to thank and help us thank all of our veterans. So we invite you to stand, clap, and sing along as the band plays its salute to each of the branches of the armed forces. Thank you. You may be seated. In closing, I would like to again thank Dr. Steve Cram for his keynote remarks, the Reverend Robert Williams for leading the invocation, the Walnut Creek Concert Band and Director Harvey Benstein, and the NOSC Alameda U.S. Navy Color Guard team. I would also like to especially recognize Liz Payne and Matt Bolender of Walnut Creek TV, who produced the video we saw of the Third Thursday group. And for their work in organizing and managing today's event, I would like to thank City Clerk Susie Martinez, Deputy City Clerk Joelle Faulkner, Jennifer Ruane, the staff and volunteer ushers of the Lesher Center, and the Lesher Center General Manager, Scott Dennison. And of course, tremendous thanks to the veterans of the Third Thursday Lunch Group for allowing us to share your stories with the community. Finally, I want to thank all of you for joining us today to help us honor our veterans. There is no greater job that we have than to honor these wonderful individuals. The concert band will close our ceremony with John Philip Sousa's Semper Fidelis, after which we hope you will all join us in the lobby for a short reception where you can also converse with our veterans and the members of the Third Thursday Lunch Group. Thank you, everyone. Again, Bandmaster Benstein, take it away.